All right. Welcome everybody to the Penn State World Campus Technology Club. Our talk tonight is about cyber threat intelligence and APT 101 with John Stoner. Thanks for joining us, John, and you can start whenever.
All right, well, thanks for inviting me here. Hopefully you guys will find this presentation interesting. So I'm John Stoner. I'm the Deputy Director of one of 6 mission directorates at the DoD Cyber Crime Center, and we're called DICE. I'll explain the acronym in a minute. If you have any questions, feel free to chime in at any point, ask your questions. You don't have to save them to the end. You can interrupt me. So the beginning part of this presentation is going to talk about sort of a little bit about DC3 and DICE and sort of like what the government's doing in this space a little bit, and then we'll dive in all about cyber threat intel and the kill chain and some things like that. This is meant to be sort of a very approachable introductory sort of topic as well. So I'm going to try to use a lot of analogies. We have a movie analogy to try and explain the kill chain. So if you are experienced, that's fine. But if you don't have a lot of experience or really understand cyber threat intel, you're actually the audience for this presentation. So that's the agenda. We're going to go through all of those topics today. And this really does take me between 45 minutes and an hour. But we'll have time for questions. I can stay on the line. So there's a lot of questions I think in general that the public has about like what is the federal government or what is the DoD doing in cybersecurity? So I work at the DoD Cyber Crime Center. It's one of 7 federal cyber centers that we have. We're probably one of the smallest of those 7. So we have about 500 personnel total, and we are located in Linthicum, Maryland. It's really close to the BWI airport. Some of the other federal cyber centers include like NSA and FBI, which are gigantic. So we are the smallest of all of these 7 federal cyber centers. So we are also a center for digital and multimedia forensics, cyber investigations, training, technical solutions. We do quite a lot in the cyber analytics world as well. And I'm gonna, talk about all of those things on the next slide as well. So the DoD Cyber Crime Center, the name sometimes throws people off because when it was founded, cyber wasn't in the jargon, right? So there was no cybersecurity. So people were like, oh, you guys deal with crime. Yes, we also deal with stuff that is just now cybersecurity. I think they should update the name. We also have some people involved in like document and media exploitation, DOMEX, and a counterterrorism mission. So there's a handful that work at NMEC in Bethesda doing that mission as well. So like if you think about it like in a counterterrorism operation, you think like a traditional tactical military, they kick in the door, they go in, try to round up some personnel or take evidence. A lot of this evidence nowadays is digital, and they can't wait to send it back to a cyber forensic center and do the forensics analysis. So a lot of that stuff has to get triaged really quickly on site for actionable insight. So there's some personnel that handle that as well. And where I work, we really focus on providing cybersecurity information and support to defense contractors. So if I say CDCs, that's a clear defense contractor. So that's a private company that deals in a contract with the Department of Defense, and their personnel have some level of clearance, and they have a facilities clearance, which means they have the ability to store classified information at some site, at like a headquarters or somewhere. So DC3 is the single repository for all of the contractor defense reporting about cyber incidents for their unclassified network systems. The other interesting thing about DC3 is we're about 500 people, but we're very reliant on contractors, more so than most agencies, because the skill sets required at DC3 make it really hard to retain that talent in the federal government. So there are 6 mission directorates. So there's the training academy, it's the cyber training academy, and they're providing a variety of cyber classes and forensics classes that aren't available elsewhere. So they don't compete against commercial markets. So they really aren't in like the Net Plus or Sec Plus business anymore. So they do have some introductory courses, mostly geared for law enforcement that need to get up to speed and need that foundational training. And they have all the way up through 4 full forensics courses where somebody can get a certificate and become a certified forensics investigator. We have our technical solutions and development team, our TSD team. They're sort of like our in-house R&D and DevSecOps folks. So they make and maintain a lot of the internal software and internal analytic tools that we use at DC3. And they're a bunch of really talented guys. They're making a DC3 mobile app, which is just crazy. Like the only other agency I know that has mobile app is NGA. So we're trying to get something started in that space as well. And then as we move down, there's the Vulnerability Disclosure Program, VDP. So VDP is an organization that works for DoD information assets on the DoD, the DoD information networks. And they work with white hat hackers through a program called HackerOne. So these white hat hackers and researchers are able to, within the rules that govern it, look for vulnerabilities on DoD networks and report them in. And that's been so successful, they're going to expand the program. It's only, I think, 3 years old already. But they're proactively, crowdsourcing vulnerability disclosure and then tracking that to completion. So that's the newest mission area that we have at DC3. We have the analytic group, or AG as we call them. They were originally part of NCIJTF. NCIJTF is a FBI-led multi-agency task force for countering cyber. And they were the analytic component of that. That task force eventually mostly focused on like collaboration and deconfliction. And so the AG sort of spun off and became a separate directorate at DC3. So they do a lot of really in-depth cyber threat analysis. They also, most of the people in AG are also linguists. So they have a number of personnel who are cybersecurity experts who understand the intelligence community and are native language speakers all in one individual person. That is extremely unusual, and it allows a lot of really unique analysis that a traditional organization can't have. And if they have some people that aren't linguists as well as cybersecurity experts, their cybersecurity experts tend to be very specialized and very technical. We work with them a lot. Their customers that they support are mostly law enforcement, like NCIS, OSI, or some of the other intelligence agencies. We have our forensics lab, and that was one of the original components of DC3. So the forensics lab is a purple organization. It serves all sorts of customers within the DoD. And this lab is so good that basically other labs sometimes send them stuff that they don't know what to do with. So they have a lot of capabilities to, for instance, like unlock cell phones, take apart IoT devices. Like they're cutting edge on like trying to get forensics information off an IoT device in support of an operation or investigation. So a lot of what they're doing is supporting law enforcement and traditional sort of investigations that law enforcement or counterintelligence might run. We also work really closely with them as well because our customers, those companies I talked about, the clear defense contractors, are able to send in malware for analysis or maybe like a potential file that they don't know if it's malicious or not. And the lab can do full forensics on that. And then we're there at the bottom we're the DIB collaboration. We're the DoD DIB collaborative information sharing environment because only the DoD can have acronyms that are that crazy. So we're providing threat products about mostly advanced persistent threat actors. That's been the bread and butter in our 12 years. We do a lot more with ransomware nowadays as well. And we provide not only information back to the clear defense contractors, but we foster this collaborative crowdsourced environment. So those are all the directorates at this one single federal agency at DC3. So where I work specifically is in the DIB collaboration, where our directorate's called DICE. And I'm not going to talk about everything on this slide, but we support over 724 clear defense contractors. So they are able to share information with each other on platforms that have been developed for that sharing. And we also share government furnished information with them. So like we curate information from the rest of the intelligence community and get that downgraded from a classification level to something that they can use. We host a number of other events as well to foster that collaboration. One of the things I would highlight on here, like what is the government doing to, help with cybersecurity? Well, with these companies that work with the Department of Defense, we have performed over 70,000 hours of forensics analysis to them. And since they're in this partnership with us, they don't bear any cost for that. I mean, the cost that they would have incurred to pay some other company to do that forensics analysis would have been really high. Our directorate of about 60 people or so have produced 12,000 cyber reports, and we've shared over 400,000 indicators of compromise. So an indicator of compromise, if you're not as technical, it could be as simple as like an IP address from a known adversary. It could be, a hash from a specific new piece of malware. There's a lot of different things that could be an IOC, but those two often are very common examples. And then a lot of our analysis that we're providing is multi-source. So it could be from all of the clear defense contractors that are sending stuff in. It could be from collaborating with the analytic group in-house at AG. It could be, looking at all of the different sources of intelligence reporting as well and combining all of that together. And we do a bunch of other services as well. I'll just talk a little bit here about some of the things we do. And again, we're trying to foster that collaboration. So like we can have an analyst to analyst meeting. So if somebody from one of these companies is like, hey, I have this question. There's this new malware that I think was discovered, but we blocked it, but I have some questions about it. Like we could have some really in-depth analytic meeting about that piece of malware or the threat actor that is known to use that piece of malware. We have semi-annual 2-day conferences where we actually provide classified threat briefings and they can give presentations about things they've seen, and we invite other agencies in to give presentations. So it's really a unique sort of conference, and there's a lot of trust that has been built up over the years to allow that sharing to occur. So that's everything about DC3 and DICE. If you have questions about that, I can answer them at the end, or you can always, contact me later. I'll dive into a lot more about cyber threat intelligence now. What's really important to understand, first of all, is like cyber threat intelligence is like one specific niche area within this huge like world of cybersecurity. So I use this slide to describe some other things as well, but we're now delving into like one specialized area of cybersecurity, which is cyber threat intelligence. So there's a lot of people that could talk about cyber threat intelligence and they would give you all sorts of different answers. I found this one to be something that is helpful to explain things, especially if this is not an area where people have a lot of exposure. So I would say that they're sort of like non-processed, and the term here is operational intelligence, data that's sort of available through the systems that are deployed in a traditional IT network. So this could be like automatic detection of DDoS. It could be like the alerts you're getting from your IDS or IPS or SIM or whatever you have installed. It could be looking at your heuristics, what is being blocked by the IPS. And there's a lot of data, right? There's a lot of data available. What's really interesting is like, for most of us who come from an intelligence background, we think you get to what we call intelligence when it has been synthesized and analyzed, right? So there's data, pre-analysis, and then after the data is analyzed, you have something that most people would call intelligence. And there's a lot of reasons for that distinction. So the data is really important, but you have to do something with that data. You have to understand what's significant from the data. You have to understand the threat structure. You have to understand the company. You have to understand what the risks are. Are there certain things that we're prioritizing in terms of blocking or not blocking, or are we aware of the threat picture in a way that allows us to prioritize responding to certain types of alerts over other types of alerts? There's a whole bunch of things that are really hard to automate, even with like AI and ML, which like every presentation on Earth talks about. There's still some analytic aspects that are hard to automate. Can I have a machine understand the threats I'm most concerned about today because I got a tip that some hackers in a dark web forum were talking about my company, right? I don't know how you automate that yet. Maybe we'll get there. So the cyber threat intelligence can kind of be like very immediate or a little longer. So tactical or strategic. Like, oh, we got this tip, we need to block this IP right away. It's being seen across our industry and it's, you know, running some kind of scan, or you know, there's this email address and this email address is part of a phishing campaign that's active right now. Let's add it to the block list, right? That's very tactical, very immediate. And then there's sort of like the strategic aspect to threat intelligence. Like, you know, we operate a bank, and as a bank, there are certain types of threats we're concerned about, which are different than if we were a lumber company and we're worried about different types of threats. Or if I am a lumber company in Uzbekistan, there may be different types of cyber threats than if I am a lumber company in Alaska, right? So there's that whole aspect to understanding the threats that that particular organization or company might face. So when we talk about cyber threat intelligence, what resonates with me in most cases is analyzing sophisticated threat actors, advanced persistent threats, and understanding their tactics, techniques, and procedures over time and how that's evolving. So there's a lot of military lingo in cybersecurity, and there's a lot of military jargon and lingo from cyber threat intelligence. I think it's because a lot of the terminology fits. But if this is new to you, just know that a lot of military jargon tends to get thrown in sometimes, and TTPs is one of them. So the other thing about intelligence is, as I analyze all these threat and trends and risk patterns, right, can I get to where it's predictive? And that's always the hardest thing to do in any intelligence discipline, whether it's cyber threat intelligence or, you know, a traditional intelligence that the government does. All right, so we're way into this. You probably still don't know what cyber threat intelligence is, and it's all my fault, right? So I would say that analyzing sophisticated threats and trying to mitigate risk and understand those sophisticated threats, trends, and evolutions are, to me, what the heart of cyber threat intelligence is, right? So it's not just give me a blacklist or like give me this whitelist or explain phishing to the senior executives. Like, if there's only a small handful of organizations, private or government or public, that have the in-house ability to do cyber threat intelligence. So you are either trying to do this in-house, or you're purchasing a cyber threat intelligence capability from another firm or company, or you're just not at that maturity to understand it and integrate cyber threat intelligence. Those are the three buckets, right? So if you're doing this in-house, you should have some idea of like, what threats are we most concerned about? So like, if you're a bank, one of the number one things is the integrity of our databases, right? Because that's the money. Whatever the database says, whatever those ones and zeros in the database are, that's the money. So integrity of the data at the bank is the number one thing that cannot be compromised, right? And a lot of people might think it's like PII or like customer accounts. Like no, screw the customers. Like, the number one thing we can't have fail is trust that the database numbers that hold the money are accurate. That's the number one thing. And then maybe secondly, it's like, can people get to the website, right? I mean, like, that's very high as well, right? If you try to go to, like, you know, Bank of Nebraska and like it's a 403 error, you're going to start freaking out. So it's hard to give a singular definition of what cyber threat intelligence is, but I'm trying to do it with a description, right? So some people might say it doesn't always have to be about advanced persistent threats. So it could be just sophisticated threats. Some of the concerns that banks have are really with much more sophisticated criminal threats. And I am of the opinion that a lot of the criminal threat actors probably don't qualify as advanced persistent threats, but that's a whole topic for another discussion, another day. The other thing I want to talk about, which is probably more important than ever, is who works in cyber threat intelligence. And the answer is friggin' all kinds of people work in cyber threat intelligence. There are almost no traditional paths, although there are a number of people who were in the military and got out and worked in some intelligence capacity. That's fairly common, but I'd say fairly common in the like that still probably represents only 35 or 40% of my analytic workforce. So it's not like almost everybody was in the military and did intelligence either. I don't know that any college offers a particular bachelor in cyber threat intelligence specifically. I think it's very niche field still. And the only cert I know of is from Sands, who has, there's one class. He is a former NSA SIGINT personnel and founder of Dragos, and he teaches the class, and I have gone through the class, and it's excellent. But a lot of the other certs are sort of around the periphery. So we, one, value the diversity because we need diversity of thought. Diversity of thought helps counter cognitive bias. Those are huge problems in any intelligence discipline. So if this is something that you've never thought about working in before, there's lots of different ways and avenues and information and material to learn about cyber threat intelligence. But we do need a diverse workforce because that diversity is very helpful when we are analyzing threats, understanding threat patterns, and so we don't get caught in those like very bad cognitive loops where everybody's thinking the same way. That doesn't help people in the intelligence discipline. So moving on. So one of the things that is important, I think, for everybody to understand is like cyber threat intelligence, again, is not really applicable to every organization, whether it's a private company or a DoD entity or US government entity. Like if you struggle with basic architecture and you don't have plans and you don't have an IR plan and you're not meeting, you know, whatever NIST standards and you struggle at that phase, maybe because you're a new startup, right? You're not ready to consume cyber threat intelligence. You don't need to worry about APTs because you don't even have a password management policy. So this is sort of like a scale of cyber maturity, and an organization has to reach a certain cyber maturity before it makes any sense for them to try to incorporate cyber threat intelligence. Like if you like if a company is still struggling with overarching policies and there is no CISO and there's just some IT people, you're probably not ready to understand if you have APT risk, right? So that's what this chart is trying to explain to some degree. And the other thing is like very few organizations will ever get to the maximum side of this. Very few companies and organizations have the resources, the money, and time to be like, we do active hunting and we have purple teams and we're looking for threats in the network. Like most of the DoD organizations aren't there. Like you've heard of Cyber Command? Yeah, Cyber Command exists because the rest of the government is certainly not at that end of the spectrum, right? So the other thing that's important here is there is no such thing as absolute cybersecurity. Absolute cybersecurity is a myth and it doesn't exist. And there will be a bad day wherever you work sometime for a reason. So with this one, since we're talking about cyber threat intelligence, if you're like at the blue side and like you're brand new and you don't have policies and you just bought some stuff from Best Buy and hooked it all up on some guy's Wi-Fi and you're using WEP, which is really bad, don't use WEP, and you like have no password policies and everybody's password is their last name because that was easy for everybody to remember, then like I can probably hack into your network and that's probably not a good place for you to be, right? With one pizza, one energy drink, I could probably get into your network with like Mimikatz. Right? But even if you're at the purple end and like have active threat hunting teams because you make super crazy weapon systems for the Department of Defense and you invest a lot of money into your SOC and your incident response and your cyber threat guy and you hire ex-NSA people and it all looks great, an APT could still have enough time and effort to get into your network. There is no such thing as being 100% secure. So that's what this chart is trying to say as well. There is an endless, I hate to say the word fight, there is an endless cycle of defense and offense and defense and offense and react and you know, something else happens. So then you react again. So then something else happens. So then you react again. I mean, it's this endless cycle for cyber in the world we live today, especially if you are an organization that is a target of sophisticated threat actors. So as we dive into this topic a little bit more, and I normally give this presentation, at least I used to give this presentation with somebody else, I would always joke that now we're going to really dive in deep into the weeds and talk about the kill chain at a super technical level. And then he says, no, we're not going to actually do that. And no, we're not actually going to do that. So the cyber kill chain was trademarked by Lockheed Martin at, wait for it, DC3, where it was invented. And all of our products still map to the cyber kill chain. It is not the only method. The MITRE ATT&CK framework has become really popular lately. The MITRE ATT&CK framework is actually even more technically complicated. So I like it, but it may not be applicable in every circumstance if cyber threat information is new or you're just trying to understand it. So I'm going to walk through the cyber kill chain a little bit in a way that hopefully is explainable to everybody. And we use this, we borrow this one from military terminology still because there's a kill chain in military jargon and terminology. But this is sort of the cyber version of that. And it is mostly dealing with a sophisticated actor, right? This is not applicable to just like a cyber criminal who's trying to get your grandma to send some fake bail money. Everything starts with reconnaissance. Theoretically, I guess you could just start attacking people. I mean, that would be a weird strategy, but you know, if you're North Korea, hey, whatever you want to do, you could just randomly attack people. Most sophisticated cyber threat actors don't do that. Most of them start at reconnaissance of a particular target. So just like in Ocean's 11, they start with reconnaissance, and there's going to be a lot of Ocean's 11 reference, so that this is something everybody can understand, right? If you want to break into a bank, you got to like have a plan. I remember in high school, for whatever reason, this was the thing that we would discuss of like the perfect bank hijacking thing. Like, I don't know why that was what we did, but we would have to do reconnaissance. So in a sophisticated threat actor's mindset, I normally talk about two types of reconnaissance: technical and non-technical. So the scanning of your network, right? Running an Nmap, understanding your IP range, running a vulnerability scanner against you, right? Like, do you still have an unpatched server that we've had an exploit for the last 7 years? Because that's still really common. And then the non-technical, like, do you have a nice little org chart with all the emails of everybody that I'd want to like send a highly sophisticated spear phishing to? Oh, of course you do, because you're an American company in America and everybody has an org chart with everybody's name on it. So there's two reconnaissance types that could happen here: technical and non-technical. Then you get to weaponization. So now we know a little bit more about, you know, the target, right? So obviously in this movie, in the movie that we're going to follow sort of this chain. So hopefully, I know Ocean's 11 is like really old now. If you haven't seen it, it's still good. You get to weaponization. So to explain this, a lot of attacks still rely on phishing. And you're like, how can that be? Okay, so it's not the phishing that like Gmail catches for you. Like when we're talking about an advanced persistent threat actor, what I mean is I'm interested, let's say I'm an advanced persistent threat actor from, you know, North Soviet Russiastan, and I'm interested in this company that makes missiles for the Air Force. So I have found out that you have an org chart on your website, and I figured out everybody's email is first name dot last name at company.com, because everyone does that. So thank you for making that easy for me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to your website. I'm going to download a PDF about some crap that you guys make. I'm going to take that PDF. I'm going to put some malware into that PDF that was yours and weaponize it, because I also did a scan and I know that this malware is really likely to bypass your detection things, because I checked that on Virus Total and it has a really low detection rate. So now I've weaponized a PDF that's actually from your company. So then I send the email to somebody in your HR department who doesn't know anything about cybersecurity, and I say, hey, I would like to talk to somebody about purchasing $100 million worth of missiles. Please see the attachment. And that works 100% of the time. And it's very sophisticated, and it's very targeted, and it's very different than a general spearfish that you're going to get about, you know, someone has bought something on your Amazon account, click here to enter your credentials, which also still works most of the time. So delivery. So in this example that I'm laying out, the delivery mechanism is email. Okay, so that's not very exciting. So in the movie here, as we go along, you know, the delivery method is that there's a guy in that little cart thing and they're trying to deliver it into the safe. So if you've never seen Ocean's 11, that's what's happening. Delivery can be all sorts of things. So like email, not really sophisticated, really effective. Really sophisticated delivery mechanism. Let's say that there's an Iranian power plant in, I don't know, Natanz. And you're a government that wants to get malware onto this network, but the network is air gapped, which means it's not connected to the internet. Because if you're around, you're like, I'm not connecting the Iranian nuclear facility to the internet. I'm not an idiot. But you have German engineers come in from Siemens who periodically do some sort of maintenance on your ICS system. And the USB that they use to hook into your air gap system has Stuxnet on it. Theoretically speaking, then that would be a super complicated delivery mechanism for a very sophisticated threat actor. And if you haven't read anything about that, highly recommend you read about Stuxnet if this is a field that interests you. So delivery, anything as simple as email to like really complicated things. And frankly, like foreign conferences that give out USBs, please don't plug that into your system. Exploitation. So like, okay, so we got this PDF, we put some malware on it, we sent it to the lady in HR, we said, we would like to buy $100 million worth of your missiles, please, thank you very much. So as soon as she clicks the PDF, then some exploitation, some technical exploitation is going to happen. That malware that we've packaged into that PDF is now exploiting a vulnerability on the network that we discovered through our technical reconnaissance. So maybe they're using some sort of like antivirus software, and that antivirus software can't catch our malware for whatever reason. And now, since I'm a sophisticated threat actor, I'm going to use living off the land tactics at first so that I'm harder to detect. So I start running some PowerShell scripts on that lady's computer because frankly, PowerShell is basically enabled everywhere, even on NIPR and CIPR computers in the Army, even when command line is disabled. Just a little, interesting tidbit. So now my PowerShell is running. And maybe that PowerShell calls out to try to download some additional utilities, which gets us into installation. Now, if you're following along in the Ocean's 11, we just exploited a vulnerability on a guard to deliver the guy in that thing, and now he's installed into the vault. So from the technical standpoint, that installation is now I as an attacker, am installing additional tools that I need for whatever my end purpose is. The tools I install will be different. So if I'm not a very traditional sort of espionage sort of APT, right, I maybe just want to get in there and maybe I actually don't want the missile plans, or like I don't want to stay for persistence on your network. I just want to encrypt everything and cause you a bad day because I hate you, right? So then I'm basically just installing the ransomware, and then that's it. And then everybody knows you have ransomware because that's how ransomware works. I could just have some malware that starts to erase disks of everything that it could get to. So if you're at the installation stage of the kill chain, it's really bad, especially if you haven't detected that this is happening, because that threat actor is now installing all of the additional tools onto that victim network. Command and control. You can never have a sophisticated operation with command and control. In the movie, if you guys have seen this, you'll know that this scene actually happens way earlier, right? So a really sophisticated cyber threat actor, just sort of like in military plans, would have figured out like, what's our command and control going to be, or C2 as it's often called. What's our C2 going to be? How am I going to tell the malware what I want it to do? How am I going to communicate with the victim network once I'm in, right? So this can be really complicated in some cases, and it can be very simple in other cases. It depends on the threat actor and their level of sophistication and their purpose. If my purpose is to get into that company that makes missiles and stay there for a really long time and just like steal a whole bunch of secrets and hopefully they don't ever catch me, then my command and control is probably going to be really sophisticated, right? So now we're talking about like very periodic calls out to an other compromised system that maybe somehow domain masquerades to make it look like GitHub or something really innocuous. And I'm going to like, use some like base64 encoding. So even if somebody finds it, they really won't know what it is and they're going to move on to the next thing. Or it could be really simple and you just hope maybe it blends in with the rest of the network traffic. There's lots of different versions of command and control depending on the threat actor and what their methodologies are. And then the final thing here is actions on objectives. So in the movie, the guy is in there, he gets out of the crate, they steal the money, right? Sorry if you haven't seen this movie, it's a spoiler, it's like 12 years old. Actions on objective means that the cyber threat actor is basically able to take any action they want on the victim network, right? So if I want to maintain persistence, like it's an espionage focused sort of operation. I'm just going to try and stay there, maybe have a lot of like really slow lateral movement, maybe make sure I have more than one way back onto the system if like part of it is compromised. So like, which is going to be different if my actions on objectives are like, we're now at war and like I've gotten the order to like ransomware the crap out of this company and try and bring them down or something like that, right? Actions on objectives means that that victim network is completely pawned, you're completely owned, and the attacker could do whatever they want for whatever purposes they need. So that's pretty much the overview of the kill chain and sort of like how you can think through like what a sophisticated cyber operation potentially looks like. From the defensive side, you want to catch things as early as possible. Like if you don't catch stuff until like your installation, it's really bad. And then there's always lingering questions in incident response, like did we actually get the adversary out of the network? Did we find all of the places the adversary had like a hook into? The other thing I'll add, and I know I'm going really long at this point, so I'm going to go through a couple of things. Like the other core part of this is like, what are our intel requirements? There's like over 100 APTs. So like your intel people can't follow all of them. Which ones are most likely to attack you? What are the things you're most concerned about as a company or organization? Those become your intelligence priority requirements, right? Again, another military term, but if I don't know what the priority is, I can't analyze everything. I can't look at anything. It's too broad of a field. I do want to briefly talk about Bianco's pyramid of pain. And again, if this is new to you, there's a lot of stuff out here about this. And it really talks about the sophistication of a threat actor. So if I know your malware has a certain hash value, I could block it. But it's also really easy or trivial for the attacker to change hash values of malware. I could block an IP address, but again, like what is that, an IP address? Like I can get a new IP address in about half a second. So again, I could block it, but the adversary can change it. Domain names. Okay, so if I know you use certain domain names, maybe for Reconnaissance or C2, I start to block them. Maybe I get takedown requests. I can work with the FBI or Microsoft. All right, depending on the adversary, that's a little maybe harder for them to get new domain name space. Host network artifacts, like if I know you use PowerShell and I actually start locking down PowerShell or logging it. If there are certain other living off the land tactics you have, if I become a victim and I start hardening that, that can be much more difficult for an attacker to get around because they're people too, they only have so many tools in their toolkit. And if I know what tools they have and start really blocking them and looking for them and like making, you know, SIM, IPS, IDS, alerts for your tools, then it could be really challenging for that threat actor to get into your network then. And then if I really understand the entire threat actor's TTP, and I know like how they operate typically, and I'm looking for them, I think that I would be a target of that operator, then again, it makes it really challenging for me to become a victim. Not impossible, because there's no such thing as 100%. So there's lots of APTs out there. Again, there are hundreds. There's probably not hundreds active. There's probably like 60 roughly active, super active APTs if I had to take a wag at it. But I like to talk about APTs like the Olympics. Like anybody who gets to the Olympics is amazing. They're much more amazing than I am in whatever athletic endeavor they're in. But they're not all in medal contention, right? We know who the medal contenders are when we watch the Olympics because the announcers tell us, like, watch these 3 people. And it's rarely a surprise. So APTs are the same way. Every APT is sophisticated, but some of the APTs are really good and, like, could win the gold medal. And I categorize both of these APTs as like that upper echelon of very sophisticated, very dangerous threat actors, and they're both from Russia. So APT 28, they go by a number of different names because in the unclassified world, commercial cyber threat companies give different names to different groups. So APT 28, most famously known as Safaci or Fancy Bear, they've been active since about 2007. But they make some mistakes sometimes, which is interesting. So when they used to use a lot of malware that wasn't commercially available, that was like clearly tied to that APT set, you could look at the compile times of the malware and sort of get an idea that you're probably working like normal working hours for like a Moscow time zone, right? Because they weren't obfuscating the compile times of the malware. They also used to use a lot of 0 days, and anybody who can employ 0 days is very sophisticated because you have to find the 0 day. So the fact that they have used 0 days in the past makes them among the more elite as well. If you've never heard of VPN filter malware or NotPetya, those are very sophisticated operations that this group is suspected to be responsible for. APT 29 is sort of like their sister organization, if you will. They also are known as Cozy Bear or Cosmic Dukes. Also Russia. And the thing I would say about APT 29 that makes them sort of like elite or gold medal contenders, they like fix their malware. They patch it, they update it. I can't even get like normal people to patch things, right? Like patching is really complicated. These guys are like going in and like updating malware. They also were really good at obfuscation. They were using SSL connections for their C2 and encrypting C2 and like encryption and obfuscation. These guys are all over encryption and obfuscation, which makes them really difficult to detect if you become a victim as well. Another one that I would talk about would be Deep Panda or APT-19, also known as Shell Crew or Pink Panther. So these guys are suspected to be backed by the Chinese government, and they've targeted a lot of different industries. So it's hard to know whether or not you as a company, like off the cuff here, very high level, would be possibly a victim or you know, would this APT potentially threaten you? I mean, they've targeted government, defense, financial, telecommunications, I think hospitals, aerospace, energy, like most of the really big markets. They've been active since at least 2012, and they're probably responsible for the Anthem hack and the OPM hack that made news. I'm sure many of you have heard about the OPM hack. Everybody who has a security clearance was basically, the information was compromised. So yeah, all my information probably resides in China somewhere. All of this culminates, like if you are a company or organization that's very sophisticated and mature, and you have plans and policies and tiered SOCs and IR either on staff or you know work closely with an IR consulting company, about the best and most secure you could be would be to integrate intelligence, cyber threat intelligence into your processes about cyber defense. And so that's, you know, intelligence driven network defense. Like, can we get left of a breach, right? So that's, again, another military terminology, left of boom. Can we get information left of becoming a victim prior to being targeted that helps us? Do we get information about potential spear phishing campaigns? Do we get information about potential updates to ransomware we might be susceptible for, so that we can, you know, change our posture, patch things, you know, send a message to the workforce to be vigilant about spear phishing? Like, are there things we could do so that we don't become a victim? So I know I went through some of that fast because it's a lot of information to cover. But hopefully, you know, going through that kill chain and sort of explaining some of the steps for an advanced threat actor is helpful. This is just like the tip of the iceberg. There's a ton of information available about cyber threat intelligence. I can share the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint has a bunch of like resources and links in it at the end as well that I won't go into it today. But if you are interested in that, you can let me know. And if you're interested in additional information about cyber threat intelligence, I have like a whole email. It's filled with links and resources that I can, you know, easily forward you as well. I don't know if anybody had questions or wanted me to touch on something else, but I'd be happy to do so.
There weren't any I saw in chat. Does anybody have any questions? Last call.
Everybody's like, oh my God, that was so much information. I don't even know what to do with all that.
No, it was good.
Any questions about like DC3, cybersecurity, cyber? I'll entertain questions about soccer while I'm here. It's my sport.
I do think we should have you back for the one you gave at B-Sides, though.
The how to get started in cybersecurity.
Yeah, or something along those lines.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to give the talk about like how you guys get started. My number one advice, I don't know if everybody is like still in Penn State or a student or affiliated, there's the big conundrum of like, well, I need to get an entry-level job. In order to get an entry-level job, I need experience, right? It's like the whole like, oh my God, what has capitalism done to me thing. I would say if you want to be technical, like if you're like some weird person who likes policy, that's fine. We can get you some therapy later. But if you want to like be technical at all, have a home lab. Like figure out a way to have a home lab and practice and do some CTFs. Even like I've done one. I showed up with my Windows computer and they were like, "You're using a Windows computer?" I was like, "Yeah, it's all I have. I'm sorry." And I learned a lot. So there are some things you can do, like to show that you're very proactive in learning and hands-on learning. And I recommend people somewhere on their resume on the first page have like continuing education or continuing training. So like you can't say I have experience professionally with Wireshark, but if I've like gone through a bunch of Wireshark classes and I'm really interested in PCAP and I've spent like 20 hours at my house like looking at PCAP, I mean, yeah, get that on your resume somehow under, self-study or something like that. And I think when that comes, if that resume gets to someone like me and it's an entry-level job and I've got, Adam versus Ray, and Adam's like, yeah, I graduated, I'd like a job. I'm like, well, tell me, what do you do? And he's like, what do you mean? Tell me what I do. I play a lot of Call of Duty. And Ray's like, oh yeah, I went to B-Sides and then I practiced Wireshark and I've used Metasploit and I went to the CTF. I know who I'm going to pick, right? Like I know who shows that desire. And the first chance to do that is on that like continuing education. I know I'm just picking on you, Adam, right? Like that continuing education, because I think from the employer perspective, when we hire that entry level person, it is a huge risk. It's a huge risk. Like, and I don't think the applicants really understand that. They're like, yeah, but like, I just want a job, right? But like, I have no idea whether that person is going to like work out. So I am trying to figure out the right fit for the team and the job and the company. And do you have the skills that I can put to use and, make money if you're like in contracting or something like that? There's a lot of chat messages.
I do want to say we have a home lab presentation coming up in the next few weeks. I will post about it. So somebody's going to go through making a home lab.
Yeah, that's really good. I highly recommend, thinking about a home lab. Let's see. I'm trying to see if there's
There's one. Are all opportunities only just moved only available at the DoD for CTI?
No. There's much more opportunities in the commercial sector. Recorded Future, Flashpoint, Looking Glass, FireEye, like all of like Verizon. If you guys have never read the Verizon DBIR, that's like the DBIR. That's like the report that every year comes out. Everybody reads it and is very excited about it. It's not necessarily threat intel, but like even they have threat intel people. They actually presented at B-Sides Pittsburgh when I was there last, and then I got them to present at the conference we host. Yeah, the Verizon DBR came out maybe like 3 weeks ago. I think Recorded Future does an annual trends one too. I really like a lot of stuff that Recorded Future does. So like there are definitely opportunities in the commercial space for cyber threat intel. It doesn't always go by this name either, which is really weird. Like there's so many jobs that the job title is cyber analyst, which tells me absolutely nothing. That's like, I would like to hire a human person. Cool. What is this human person going to do? So like there's a big hiring problem too. And I would ask questions. If you're interviewing for a job for a cyber analyst, ask the interviewer when they say, do you have any questions? And everybody goes, no, I don't have any questions at all. Please hire me. God, I need a job. Say, could you describe a typical day in the life for someone in this role? If you ask that question, that will absolutely stun the people that you're interviewing with, because almost no one asks any questions at all. So anybody that asks a question at all is already like on the up and up. Like they're already towards the top of my list if they've done everything else right. But if you ask me to describe a life in the day of that job, that's huge. Because I know everybody wants a job, but you want it to be the right job too. Like don't take any job just to get a job. I know we all have different circumstances, and maybe you do. but there is danger in just taking any job and like sort of like not being on the right track that you wanted either. And that, I don't care if you're junior or if you've got 20 years, you can find yourself in a position that maybe is not ideal for where you want your career to go if you don't really understand what the position's going to be. Yeah, Recorded Future is a good podcast. There's a lot of really good cyber podcasts, and that's stuff like if you're, regardless of whether it's cyber threat intel or you want to be a red teamer or whatever, the more you can speak the lingo and stay on top of things and talk to people at conferences, that'll come out. Like, it's really obvious that you're in the know, and I think that's really important when you're talking to people and trying to get a job. I am a human person, right? I only say that because the guy I used to give this presentation to said something about human people. So I still give Ronnie crap sometimes for that. He went to an army lab though, so he doesn't work with me right now.
It reminds me of
Cyberwire is excellent.
It reminds me of like an alien pretending to be a human.
Mark Zuckerberg, I am a human.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, CTFs are like fantastic. And like if you win or place or whatever, put that on your resume. Because then, like, I talk to people all the time, and even regardless of like what you could be like in forensics, like, I don't care if you want to do policy. If you want to do policy, break some passwords and crack some passwords and then figure out why all the password policies that you've ever seen are absolute trash. And I think that's why password policies are trash, because the people who write the password policies don't actually know how people crack passwords. So then they're like one uppercase and one lowercase. No, it's entropy. 26 characters, 26 character passphrase. I hate passwords and my boss is really dumb. Great. That's the world's best password because it's so long. Any other questions? Ooh, conferences. Besides Harrisburg is coming up. I don't know about any of the other local ones.
August 20th, I think, virtually.
Yeah, Layer 8 just happened. So like if you're interested in like that kind of stuff, I really wanted to go, and I just haven't watched all the videos yet.
We gave away tickets.
Yeah, again, local, like what does local even mean this year? Just find the virtual cons. There's actually an email I'm on. It's a call for presenters, but it's really useful because it tells you like what all the upcoming ones are. What is that thing called that I'm on? I can find this real quick before we end. Carl at CFP Land. That has like all the upcoming conferences, and it's not just cybersecurity, because he's actually, I think, like a developer. So like there's a lot of developer stuff in Kubernetes, whatever that is.
Can anybody say that?
Can someone give me a description?
Shipping containers. All right. Any other questions? Going once? Nope.
Right, I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. I'll put my Gmail in here. I thought it was on the slide, but it's not because it's my official one. If you guys need anything, like hit me up. There's no dumb question. If you want me to look at your resume, if you're like, is this salary right? Like, I don't care what it is. We need more people helping other people in the community. So there's no such thing as a dumb question. If you all emailed me tomorrow, I will need some time to get back to you. But let me know if I can help. Even Adam.
Even Adam. He needs the most help. All right. Well, thank you, John. We would love to have you back.
All right. Yeah. We'll talk about that, and I'll try to come back for that, how to get into cybersecurity.
Yeah. Very cool. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. I'm going to go. I hear some thunder, and I feel like my internet's going to go out.
All right. Good luck in the Navy.